having friends at the radio station.
Yeah.
Just speak into the microphone.
Yeah.
Good evening. The hour of 6 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and channel 1302. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets just as you entered the meeting room. The public and other city councilors will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I will not recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes to has had a chance to speak. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. Written comments from the public will be accepted at the city clerk's office until Tuesday, 1 p.m. The minute taker is participating remotely this evening. Committee members, please be sure to turn on your microphone when speaking. If the minute taker is unable to hear, they will ask that you speak louder or turn your microphone on. We don't have anyone requesting to participate remotely tonight, so everybody is here in the room. We do have one absence, but everybody else is here. So with that, I guess we'll go to the first one. Is it Court for the first one? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Happy Thursday night. Not too long ago, we were without power and we had white stuff on the ground. Today, it's in the nice 50s, and I think spring is not too far around the corner. So, I'm here, Court Blomquist, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director, Assistant City Manager. I'm here with my emergency management hat on tonight. The City of Keene has a hazard mitigation plan. What a hazard mitigation plan is, it's a plan that identifies the various hazards, natural and man-made, that the city is subject to, along with identifying the risk associated with those particular hazards, and then also identifies potential projects that can help mitigate if those events were occur. The importance of a hazard mitigation plan is that the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, requires communities to have these if you seek certain types of federal funding. The types of federal funding that require this are your public assistance. In other words, those funds that a community receives after you've had a federally declared event. Some of the new programs, the BRIC program, which is building resilient communities. So if you apply for a grant for that, you are required to have this particular plan completed and approved by FEMA to get it. And there's a list of other programs through the hazard mitigation side, through the building, again, resiliency, et cetera. So it's fairly important, because if you don't, we don't do that. These plans are required to be reviewed and updated every 5 years. Our current plan was reviewed, updated, and adopted back in 2018. So 2023 is our year to be doing this plan. One of the nice things about it is that the Department of Homeland Security does provide grants to assist in updating the plans. We applied for and have received a grant. Right now that amount is $16,667 for it. This particular grant is a 10% match, meaning 10% or about $1,667 is a match from a local community. The reason it's 10%, underneath our last disaster, when that was approved by the White House, that was approved at 90% reimbursement. So that carries through in the particular for hazard mitigation grants that are granted underneath that particular disaster declaration. The local match will primarily come from staff time. Because as you can imagine, these updates and this particular plan involves community development, police, fire, public works, other departments within the city. We go through a series of meetings. One of the fortunate thing, like I said, we already have a plan in place, but we go through a series of meetings where we review the various components and sections of it. The goal is to complete this by this summer, because our current one does expire in this coming August.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, any questions from anybody in the audience? All right, I guess I'm ready for a motion.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept, execute, and expend a hazard mitigation assistance grant in the amount up to $16,667 from the New Hampshire Department of Safety Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for the updating of the city's hazard mitigation plan.
And I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions? Okay. Ready for a vote? All those in favor? And that's unanimous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Committee.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Don Lucio, City Engineer. Tonight, talking about the Transportation Heritage Trail Phase 1 project. At this point, I think you've heard us talk about this project a couple of different times for different issues. Tonight's action is related to the state agreement that we're required to sign. Just to refresh your memories, we did receive 2 separate grant agreements for this first phase. The first is through the Federal Highway Administration. That's called the Transportation Alternatives Program grant. And that's the same program that we've been using for a number of our rail trail projects. That is federal money, requires 80% federal and 20% local match. The other project, the other grant we received was a congressionally directed spending grant, AKA an earmark through Congresswoman Custer's office. That also being federal money does require an 80-20 match. We received last week, the first agreement with the state for those federal project funds. This agreement is specifically related to the TAP grant, so the amount of that agreement right now covers just the amount of the TAP grant. The DOT staff has explained that the congressionally directed funds are still kind of working their way through the state process through governor and council and whatnot. But they do expect once that gets approved, they're going to basically merge the 2 projects together and we'll get an updated grant agreement or project agreement. So the motion before you tonight includes the authority for the manager to sign that project agreement for the first phase, as well as any subsequent amendments, anticipating that we will be getting an amendment for to cover the additional project funds. And I realized just while I was sitting here that I didn't put the amount of the grant in there. So I looked it up real quick. The total project funded by the TAP grant is $686.75, of which $544,540 are federal funds and $136,135 come from the local match. And another item you heard recently, you'll recall, Pathways for Keene and Monadnock Conservancy came in together with some donations totaling $52,000 to help with that local match. And I'd love to take your questions.
Any questions from the group? I guess I have one. So that the remaining 80,000, I think it's 90,000 of local, is that budgeted in a specific area aligned with timing and everything for this?
Yeah,
I just want to make sure we're.
Yeah, the match for the remaining match for what we have now has already been appropriated in fiscal '23 and previously. And we also will be having a request for some additional local match that comes forward with the FY24 CIP updates.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're aligned from a timing perspective. There weren't any surprises there. Okay. Any questions from the public? All right. Seeing none, ready for a motion?
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a project agreement along with future amendments, the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, NHDOT, to implement Phase 1 of the Transportation Heritage Trail Project.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right. Ready for a vote? All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, next up, I think we have Andy for a couple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Andy Bohannon, Parks Recreation Facilities Director. So there's two items very similar in nature. The first item is to have the city manager be authorized to negotiate and execute a memorandum of understanding with the Keene Dog Park, Inc. If you recognize that, the dog park folks have officially become a 501c3, which was part of the criteria that we had set forth for them to go out and fundraise and begin to work on getting a dog park up and running here within the city at Wheelock Park that was designated last year for that purpose. And so what we had said to you at that time was when the time was right, we would come back and begin to create that MOU for the two groups. This one is for the dog park group. And part of this request too is that the city, through the previous efforts of the dog park, they went out and they had raised just slightly over, and I mean like $1 or $2, over $10,000. And that had been held in an account, reserve account here within the city, because we were the fiscal agent for them. And so with our request to move forward helping them with the project, they had Phil's Tree Service, who's under contract with the city to perform tree work. They had utilized him to go out and get a quote. He gave them a pretty significant, generous donation from in-kind, but there's still $10,000 to be paid. So they want to use that $10,000 that they have in the reserve for that purpose. So they've given us permission in writing, and so I wanted to come forward with you to make you aware that we're spending that $10,000 for that purpose. If anybody likes to help out the Keene Dog Park, they have a right on their webpage, keendogpark.org, their fundraising efforts. And when I spoke to them earlier this week, they're on their way. They have almost about $35,000 pledged to them, and they have several other requests out there. So they're getting things rolling. So they're doing well.
It's great to hear. So any questions from the committee? Okay. The only thing I have I think it's on both of these, the intent of these agreements is to be cost neutral to the city. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
There is some work that we need to do in the park in general, and so I know that Andy is timing some of the work that we're doing related to the park with some of these projects. But yeah, the actual building of the facilities for both the dog park and the disc golf should be neutral cost to the city.
And the ongoing maintenance with that as well?
Yeah, so working with both groups, part of the agreement, like we did with the mountain bike club, is, having ongoing maintenance performed by their group, related to, trash and pickup and general cleanup of the area. Obviously, mowing and trimming, it was gonna fall back on, the city as part of our routine, but for the general part, especially the dog park folks, there's potentially a lot of poop that needs to be picked up, and that's part of the process.
Okay. With that, is there a thought on what would happen if they fell out of compliance with that agreement? Okay, that is understood. Okay, fair enough. And that's the only, my hesitation with having a negotiate and execute recommendation coming out of it is that we don't know what that is. So that's my only hesitation with any negotiate and execute, but I'm otherwise good. Any other questions? Okay. I'm ready for a motion then, I guess. Oh, sorry.
I'd be happy to provide a copy of the executed agreements in the council mailboxes if you'd like,
That
once
would
they're
be
done.
awesome, just for informational.
Ready?
Ready? I think so.
Okay. Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a memorandum of understanding with the Keene Dog Park, Inc. for the purposes of building and maintaining a dog park in Wheelock Park.
Second.
Awesome. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor? All right, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to the second one.
So the second one is extremely similar, related to the Keene Disc Golf Club in the execution of putting together a 9-hole golf course within the campground as well. Now, this group will be ready long before the dog park folks, and so I have a meeting with them tomorrow just related to their status and where they're at. They've had some travel, so we haven't been able to, in overlap of vacations, haven't been able to quite meet up, but they're on track as well, from my understanding. And city staff has gone out and done some GIS components of that particular course, just to make sure everything's aligned with the DuBois and King survey that was presented to you back in the fall. So, and then we just need to work on the agreement, and we should be good to go, and we'll get an executed copy in your mailboxes as well. So,
Any questions on this? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just out of full transparency, as I'm sure the committee is well aware, that I've been involved in this project for a while as a avid member of the Disc Golf Club. However, I'm not, of course, on the board and would not be involved in the signing of this agreement. So I don't believe there's any conflict there.
Any challenges or questions from the committee? Okay. I think you're all set. Cool. Any questions on the disc golf course? The only one I have is very similar on the maintenance piece. Is there any specialized maintenance? I know you mentioned for the dog park we'd be doing the lawn mowing and things like that. I'm not a disc golfer, but I know for a golf course, the lawn mowing is a lot of work. I don't imagine it's the same for disc golf, but nothing special like that.
really, they put the tees out, they put the baskets out, and it's very little. But I do know that they would perform, general maintenance days where they would clean up some of the tee boxes and keep the course in general looking good condition. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just add to that too. The club has, I believe it's a decade now of experience maintaining Otterbrook at this point, and we do regularly go out, especially after the storm we just had with all the limbs down. We'll be up at Otterbrook cleaning that one off. It's really important for us to keep the golf courses well maintained in a professional manner. So that's definitely something we've experienced in, and we'll continue with this course as well.
Awesome. Thank you. With that, any questions from anybody in the audience? Okay. I guess ready for a motion.
Move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a memorandum of understanding with the Keene Disc Golf Club for the purposes of building and maintaining a 9-hole disc golf course in Wheelock Park.
And I second.
All right. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think the next few are you, city manager.
Thank you. First this evening, I wanted to talk to you about a grant application that we have been working on. I've been working with our police chief, Steve Stewart, and former police chief, Steve Russo, to put together a grant application for a social worker position at the Keene Police Department. The application would be to the Opioid Abatement Trust Fund. So if you remember, we were one of the 23 litigating subdivisions, and so we are receiving much smaller payments, the 15% of the settlement amounts as the state continues to settle these accounts. The money that the city receives is deposited into its own account, and it's kept year to year. It's restricted. It must be used for the purpose of abatement of opioid issues, and we haven't spent any of that money. Right now, we have $113,123.85. That is multiple payments. So there's 3 small payments and then 1 large payment. So some of these settlements are coming in over 18 years. Those small payments are the 18-year payments, and then the 1 large is a big lump settlement that they did. I think it was the Johnson & Johnson settlement recently. I am also on the Opioid Abatement Commission. So I've been working on the RGA, so putting together the grant application that's going out to all the communities and nonprofits. It's not just communities that can submit for these funds. They did do 1 round already, and we did not submit in that first round. We weren't prepared to submit. They are getting ready to do another round right now, but it's strictly for MAT, so medicated assisted treatment. So, and it'll be directed to counties that are required to provide MAT. It'll be a partial reimbursement for those costs back the last couple of years. And so that will be the next round of applications. But after that, there will be another round similar to the first, looking for projects such as the one that we are about to discuss with you this evening. I think I have to recuse myself once they end up looking at these projects, but I am part of the process right now. And so they're looking at making some additional modifications to the grant before it goes out again. We learned a lot. I will tell you, I'm honored to be asked to serve by the governor on this commission, but it has been a very slow-moving commission. We've had quite a bit of money in the bank, meaning the state, and has not really gotten it out the door as quickly as I think we should have. But they're working on it, and so now that they have a process in place, I'm hoping it's going to go faster. The first round of grant applications that was awarded several months ago is scheduled for April. So it just kind of gives you a sense of how long it took to go to the April governor and council meeting to get approval to actually get the check cut back to the organization. Many nonprofits were part of that first round, and then there were a few municipal applications in a couple of counties. The state right now has in the bank about $37 million, or almost $38 million from settlements. So they had 44, but we've obligated 6.86 of that. No, 6.86 of that went to municipalities, and then they are obligated, and I don't remember the exact amount from the first round, but they are expecting another settlement to come in from Walmart by June, and they expect that to be another $15 million. In the end, all told, there should be over $300 million received by the state of New Hampshire. And so there will be a lot of many grant rounds in the future, because right now, the way that the statute and the rules are written, every time the state has $500,000 in the bank, they're supposed to go out for an RGA. So, and I think they're working to change some of that and modify some of the language, because it's been really difficult. And I can tell you that they're also looking at staff, because they're not staffed up for this to go through the process. The Division of Health and Human Services they're the division that is handling these grants and working with us. The commission hired a staff person to be added, but once the grants start rolling out, somebody else has to be monitoring and getting all the reports. So there's more work to be done. I originally thought we'd be ready to submit for the next round in April. I think that's optimistic, given the last meeting I went to on Monday. I think it might be May or June, the way that things are going. There's a question right now as to whether or not they can have multiple RGAs happening at the same time, and we haven't quite yet clarified if it's a legal question or a capacity in terms of time and staff. So we'll clarify that at the next meeting, and I would like to see both rounds going at the same time, the reimbursement to the counties and then the next round of applications. So what we did is we took the first round of applications and the RGA that was used by the commission and structured a grant application to meet that application from the first round. We know it will need to be tweaked once the commission finalizes the next RGA. But in summary, I'll try to just summarize what we're talking about. And what we're talking about doing is not something new. We've talked about this a few times in a few different arenas, but we're talking about bringing on a social worker for the police department to provide follow-up assistance and referral services and coordinate across the continuum of care for people involved with certain law enforcement calls, for services such as substance use disorders, mental health issues, or co-occurring issues, as well as serving those seeking assistance on their own. So basically, in a nutshell, the calls that come in that are drug-related, having someone that is following up with these individuals and making sure that they are referred to treatment, that they're making that connection in the community. The other thing that we're looking to do is make the connection with our Human Services office as well, and making sure that both of those offices are working together. And so this social worker would be a brand-new job description that would need to be, if we were successful at getting this grant, it would need to be added to the salary scale as part of the budget process. And we don't have a finalized job description. We have a draft into HR, and we haven't priced it out yet. But what we will be asking for in the grant is the maximum 2 years, 100%. There's no match. They will want to know what we're doing with our money, our $100,000 that we have. You know, the smaller payments that we are receiving will sustain us partially into the future for this position, but will not cover it all. I mean, we have some big lump payments that are coming in, but I don't anticipate it to be 100% of this social worker position if we do get it in and it's successful. But the 2 years will give us a good look at what this position can do in terms of connecting people with resources in our community. And I think it's in line with what this money is meant for, and it's something that's really desperately needed. The police officers do not have time. They hand out a card, at a scene, but they don't have time to go back in most cases and make sure that that person is being then referred. And so I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us. The chief has been great about brainstorming this and looking at it and seeing how it might fit into the department. We also anticipate some initial training for our police officers and our dispatchers, and so we are planning to include that as part of the application as well. We've done a lot of work already in the department around mental health training. I just talked about the NAMI training that was recently at the department. But all of these things are really tied together. And, while this grant money is really for substance use disorders, we know that many times there are co-occurring disorders. If someone may also have a mental health issue, there are multiple things that are going on. So it'll let us reach across the spectrum. So I don't have a dollar amount, and I'm not actually asking you to do anything tonight, but I really wanted to talk about this grant application with you because assuming I get the grant in, I will put it tentatively in the salary schedule, and then once I know whether or not I'm successful at getting the grant, I'll come back to you. Because if I'm not successful for whatever reason, I still think this is an important role, and I think we have some money to get this off the ground using the opioid abatement funds that we've been reserving, the $111,000. And that is the reason why we haven't been using our funds. We've just been putting it aside because you really want to have something that you can sustain instead of these one-hit infusions of money. And so we're trying to come up with more of a systematic approach. And hopefully this will be something that you would support. And I do have the chief here tonight in case you want to ask him any hard-hitting questions. He's going to answer them all.
I have three things.
Sure.
One is, are there other cities within the state that are already doing it? And are we
Yes.
talking to them on
Absolutely.
how they do it and
Yes.
what the parameters of their position is and how successful is it?
Yes. So I'm hope I get the communities right. You can, if I get them wrong, you can tell me. So I know one, Laconia, because back when I was the city manager in Franklin, we worked with Laconia on an outreach program to do exactly this. It was something that we didn't do in Franklin, but Laconia was kind of leading the way with their program. And so we met with Laconia via Zoom. That is a benefit of COVID. We now can reach across the state pretty easy and have these meetings, and we did talk to them. Their model has their person, their outreach person, as a police officer. And initially I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But then, we met with, I think it was Dover, right? And Dover is a separate social worker embedded in the police department. And that actually seems to work better for a variety of reasons. The social worker is embedded in the department, and I think that there's no intimidation that he or she is a police officer. And while Eric Adams, who's the individual who did this work in Laconia, worked really hard to build his reputation, I think that's a barrier right off out of the gate. And so having someone that's not a police officer, that's a social worker, I think would be beneficial. And I can tell you that this has been so successful in those communities, they've added more. So Laconia has added more, and then Dover is either in the process or just recently added more social worker positions, like one above and then one that works underneath. So a supervisory role and then another role, social worker role in the department. And they're having great success. Now, we asked about metrics, because usually when you're looking at a grant, you're also looking at how do you report your metrics out. It's tough to report the metrics. So you're looking at things like how many connections were you successfully able to make. You're looking at how many times did people come back, how many people got arrested again. You're trying to cut down on your recidivism, and but it is a tough thing to track. But I can tell you the ones that I know that have done it, it's been successful and it's actually growing. The other thing that happened, Laconia became a model, and the state actually worked with Laconia to get a grant, a federal congressionally directed, I think it was a congressionally directed grant, to work with a handful of communities. I don't know those communities off the top of my head, but to set up the same sort of program with them. We obviously weren't one of them. They didn't call us, but.
So I had two reactions. When I saw it, I said, oh, this is excellent. It's so needed and been needed for a long time. And then I thought to myself, one doesn't sound like enough. But
Yes.
my other question is, with all the incidents that occur where our first responders, will that social worker also be working with the fire department and the EMTs and in addition to police? Because, there's
Yeah.
a lot of crossover.
So in terms of referral of people, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But in terms of the employees themselves, probably not. It'll be a separate role. We haven't quite ironed that all out, but our EMS providers need support, and we're doing it in different ways. The police department has a peer-to-peer program. The fire department often uses the Brattleboro retreat. I think that's their name. And so, there's a need for that as well, but this is really focused on citizens and people that we're coming in and interacting with. Yeah.
So just to be clear, when I asked about first responders, what I was thinking of is their interaction with
Yes.
citizens and
Yes.
being able to call the social worker for, I wasn't.
Yes.
Although that's a very good idea.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
also have to think about them in those terms. And then the other thing is, it also would be a good, perhaps, a liaison to the local, like Monadnock.
Yes.
Family Services and.
Yes. We talk about that in our grant application, about making those personal connections, because what Laconia and Dover have found, by making the personal connections, they can get people in faster. I think that, there's such a waiting list to get into some of these programs, and by making the personal connections, they've had more success getting people placed.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say this is great that we're going after this opportunity. I know this is something that we talked about last year during the Housing Stability Committee. So really glad to see this. I would be interested as well to know what projects we're working on with the 113,000 that we do have at the moment. I know there's other projects that we had discussed, such as and I think actually Councilor Madison brought this up as well, which is maybe like a needle deposit program, something like that. So I would be interested to see what other projects we kind of have in the hopper, but again, really glad to see this one.
So we don't have projects in the hopper for this money because we're saving it for this program. Yeah, so because if we're not successful in the grant, I'd like to use the money to at least partially offset this position. If we do receive the money for the grant, I'd like to look at how do we make that money spread out so that we can sustain the position. I agree with Councilor Chadbourne. We're probably going to want more help. I think the need is so great. It's going to be a lot for one person, but so I've kind of kept it and reserved till we sort of know what's going to happen with this, and then come back and talk about that again. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions from the, go ahead.
I just want to thank you and the police chief for your initiative on this. I think it's good that we're finally looking at thinking outside the box and joining other towns and realizing that we're not going to arrest or jail our way out of the current opioid crisis or the current mental health crisis. So I think this is definitely a big step in the right direction. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions from the public, from the audience? Come up to the microphone, just state your name and address for the minute taker.
Hello, my name is Jody Newell, and 32 Leverett Street here in Keene. I'm sorry, I'm a little emotional thinking about it, so you're just going to have to bear with me for a quick second. But this money is money that is to compensate for the harm that was done to people like me. And I'm just begging you, I am imploring you, as I have asked you before, to please don't put this through the police department. I asked you. And I don't say it because I have any problem with the police. I don't. I have all the respect in the world, especially for the Keene police. I've never had a bad interaction. But people who have substance use issues deal with the police on a regular basis in a very negative way. So if we actually want to use this money to save other people's lives, I would beg you to separate it from the people who are tasked with enforcing the criminalization of substance use. If we actually want to use this to save lives, it needs to be separated. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Something that, I know this is informational tonight, but something we should consider as we go forward with this, of where it lives, whether it's within the police or health services, just something, or wherever it makes sense, yeah, something to consider. Any other questions, comments? Thanks. Councilor Williams?
Just to say that I reiterate the concern with having it with the police department. No disrespect to our police department. I think they do a great job. But substance users have a great deal of fear of police, and there's going to be a barrier if this position is associated with the police. So I would prefer to see it associated with fire department and EMS. That takes it out of the criminal responsibility and makes it a health matter, and I think that's kind of an important philosophical thing. So my preference would be to keep it with, or to put it with the emergency medical services. But all in all, I think very positive development, and wherever this lives, I think it's a very necessary role.
Thank you for your comments. Anything else from the committee, from the public? All right. With that, I'll take a motion.
Move to recommend the update on the opioid grant application be accepted as informational.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further comments? All right, ready for a vote? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Next one, still city manager for fire department. Welcome, chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so two big topics for you this evening. Tonight I'm asking for you to direct me to draft a resolution to transfer $492,528 from fund balance to allow the hiring of 4 firefighters. Now, the process would be, we draft a resolution, it goes to council, it gets referred back here. So we come back and we talk about it again. But, you know, this is also not a new topic to us. We have talked about the need for more firefighters for a few years now. And Chief Howard, before he retired for several years, brought forward a request to hire 4 firefighters. As a result of his requests, we actually created a staffing committee, and before he retired, we finished a staffing report. And Councilor Remy, Councilor Powers participated in that staffing committee, and we analyzed what's happening with our community, with our region, and with our department. And we were able to see the continued growth in calls, what types of calls, how long it takes us to answer some of these very complicated calls, and then the staffing that we've had. And I think it was 2008 was the last time we made a staffing adjustment, and at that time it was we gave up a position to get some additional assistance. So we made some changes in the department. But back a couple of years ago, we made the decision to run 10 firefighters per shift. That allowed us to have a 3rd ambulance, and we've been doing that, since then. And it's costing us a fortune. So this is not, it's costing us a fortune because that 10th person is always an overtime person. It's always someone coming in on overtime. And so when you calculate that out versus hiring and having 11 firefighters per shift, but keeping your minimum at 10, and that it really makes a difference in terms of your budget. And so I did provide to you, and I gave you a revised sheet with some numbers that were provided with the help of the HR department and the fire chief, looking at the cost of a firefighter versus filling a shift versus filling it on overtime. And before we really get into all that, I want to talk about something you're not going to see on these sheets. You're not going to see in these numbers. It's what's happening to our people. When we are asking at every shift to bring in someone on overtime, they are working an enormous amount of hours each week. And that is creating a ton of stress on them, their personal lives, but it's also creating injuries, and that is creating workers' comp claims, and we're getting, leave requests. So when you add all those things together, we're doing it. We're at 10, when we can, but it's at a great expense, both financially and personally. So, we looked at the numbers and we said, does this make sense to bring in 1 additional firefighter per shift? And it does. So if you look at the sheets, I gave you the base rates, and we're looking at not only what does it cost for a firefighter in terms of wages, but we're also looking at the non-personnel costs. So for instance, there's required training that every firefighter has to have every year, and they're going to be outfitted, with gear. So we've added those things into that calculation. And because this is how I always do it, I use the most conservative numbers, meaning it's the worst case scenario. We looked at if the 85% versus the 80% available. So in your sheets, if you look at the information provided by the fire chief, he breaks it down, how many hours per shift, how many hours in a year we're filling, and then calculating that at overtime rates versus at, with a regular firefighter. And so at the 85% available calculation, it's $128,374 savings in the first year. But when I talk about savings, I want to be very clear that we have been overrunning the fire department budget for several years. So we've been moving money from the police department to the fire department to cover overtime expenses. Now, they've got a little thing between them to saying, oh, you know, Chief, you're going to give me some money this year. But in reality, if we ever are successful to fill the positions at the police department, we will not have that money. We are trying to recruit, but we are usually 6 officers short. And so that has allowed us to move money from one part of the budget to the other without creating any additional expense. But someday that's not going to be the case. And so I'm asking you tonight to make this adjustment. And the reason why I'm asking you to do it now is because it will take us a long time to get someone hired and trained and on the shift. There's a lag time when you're bringing in new employees, and we're going to continue to pay during that lag time overtime. So and that's what I wanted to say, but, you know, the chief did these numbers for me, and so the 85%, the 80%. So if you want him to walk through some of that, we can have him do that and talk about, you know, some of the things that he's seeing in terms of calls and activity and the impacts to his department.
Sure. So the city manager said overtime is a large issue for us. So overtime at its core, right, is best used to answer temporary work fluctuations, right, not as a permanent staffing model. So we've been stuck in this protracted bad area for some years now where overtime is our primary staffing model, and that has a lot of very bad parts to it. As the city manager spoke about, it's not only financial capital, it's human capital. So I'll speak on human capital first, then we'll get back to the FOP part of the equation. I am truly worried about my staff. Our call volume is excessive. Out of 2 fire stations, we do 5,500 calls a year. That's 15 calls a day on average, and those calls are increasing in complexity and duration. So, and the city manager also said that our staffing hasn't increased since 2009, but our call volume has increased over 2,000 calls in the same period of time. And we've also been carrying some longer-term vacancies through overtime as well, which compounds the issue. In the boring part of fire chief school and graduate school, right, we look at budgets, and the central question of all fire department, even police department budgets in that continual staffing model is, where is that breakover point between, is it cheaper to hire full-time employees or is it cheaper to pay overtime? And there's 2 basic mathematical models we can use, and we ran them both through our current numbers, and we are so far over the line of that it's cheaper, dramatically cheaper to hire more full-time employees by a large margin. So I'm the unique and enjoyable position as a department head to say I can actually save money by hiring more people, and that's actually factually correct. And also, not only does it answer our current problems, it also protects us against if we lose more people or more injuries, or we also have about 5 or 6 people eligible for retirement, which is always difficult, especially when the notification of losing an employee, whether through a long-term absence or through retirement, it's about a 6 and 9 month window to get that person up and running, so they actually go in to fill the overtime spot. So as we're in a very tenuous and really unsustainable position now, and that potentially could get worse. We see that in increased worker comp injuries. We have a lot of injuries right now. There is, I could speak at length, but there is an emotional toll on the members. We have some members that are truly suffering now with some PTSD and other issues, right? And that is directly related to our call volume and lots of hours. That's hard to manage, and we definitely need some reinforcements as far as adding some more folks. Again, the numbers hold up as far as hiring more full-time employees, and our current position is really unsustainable. So the math works, and it's pretty hard to walk you through with this in this finite time we have here. But we've produced some pretty good numbers. I can, for the largest council meeting, if we get there, I can give a lot of background information to understand it all. But we are in the position where adding more staff members is not only necessary, it's actually a cost savings for us.
Thank you very much. For my sake, just the 85% and 80%, what are we experiencing? Do we know?
Actual?
Yeah.
The first part of that is we're short full-time employees, so some of our overtime is just to fill a full-time slot. Assuming we're at 10 a shift, which is at that 40, our actual consumption rate, if we average out over the past 2 years, if we average out injury leave, FML leave and such, is right about that 80% mark, right? So the 80% mark would be the cleanest way to answer your question, although it's actually, our utilization is much higher because on top of the normal consumption rate for overtime is we're also filling full-time positions at the same time, if that makes sense. Yeah. And even considering the benefit load, there's a 40% difference hour for hour between paying someone a straight time and someone paying overtime. So for every hour that we're paying someone overtime, it's 4% more than paying someone a straight time.
I appreciate the work that went into this. Obviously, being part of the original group, I'm a little bit familiar with this already. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The hard part is that it's obviously an impact over budget. So yes, we're going to look at it as a net savings versus experience, but when it comes time for budgeting, you're going to be asking for a different, for an increase there. Any questions from the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question looking ahead, because I know the budget's coming up soon. Do we expect these 4 positions and a similar dollar amount to be in next year's budget?
So, let's see, if I'm asking for it to be moved right now so that it will be part of the budget, and it'll need to be carried forward, so it'll remain part of the budget, but the timing of like when we need the money, because we're going to have the first year, or most of it, is only the portion of it in that first budget.
I would
you know what I
expect
mean?
that we might very well have to analyze
Yeah.
whether we need to include a portion of it for the tail end of
That's what
this
I was
upcoming
thinking, yeah.
fiscal year, depending on, I mean, we know that at this point, the implementation isn't probably going to incur for,
Right.
at least, begin to occur for at least a month or two. So it may very well work out that the first year, by the time we get up to implementation and using the money we allocate through fund balance, doesn't impact this upcoming proposed
Right.
budget.
Yeah, because if we do it upfront now through fund balance, there could just be like a month or two difference. It just depends on how many people we get in and how fast we get them in. But in that following year, that number goes up because, you all have used the fund balance to go over the next 12, 13, 14 months.
Yeah, because the reason I guess the reason I was asking was, do we need, I guess, the full, I guess, annualized amount
Yeah.
right now if we're just going to be budgeting for that for the next fiscal year?
Yeah, I mean, so we talked about this. We can do it, we can partially fund it and then fund the remaining part in the upcoming budget year. But the challenge that I have is I'm only going to have a fiscal policy of this much, and fire is going to be this much of it. So, it's going to take up the available dollars for the overall operating budget. And so however we work this, I'm trying to make it so that this change does not hurt us going into the upcoming budget process. You see what I mean?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I can see where that goes. The hard part is that it's
It's going to hit us in
kicking
a
it down
later
the
year.
road,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah. So I've thought of this method also. We could appropriate what we need right now, get it into the salary schedule, and then I can separate the fire in my calculation. you know, I do it, it's not a tax cap, it's a fiscal policy, it's your fiscal policy. I can calculate the difference and show it in the calculation separately from the rest of the budget.
Personally, I think that would probably be the most fair for the council to review, is looking at it as a, hey, you have the decision to go above your fiscal policy by this
Right.
amount.
And I would just say the benefit to that is then we're not kicking it down to the next road. And as long as we go in with that understanding, I think that works. I think that works well.
It actually, based on our timing right now, we have almost exactly 6 months left of the year, so you would end up, wow, our fiscal's different, never mind,
Yeah,
sorry, I'm in a
we're
different fiscal year.
Fiscal, yeah.
We're a few months left,
Yeah.
but it would help split it up a
Right.
little bit.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I just wanted to say we're really fortunate that we have the people that we do serving that have been willing to step up to the plate and compensate for the lack of, employees. So, thank you.
Go ahead.
I would just echo Counselor Chadbourne's sentiments. I understand that $500,000 is strong medicine, but I know the members of the fire department have been taking strong medicine with short staffing for a long time. So this is desperately needed, I think. You know, I live on Elm Street. I've seen the fires firsthand. I mean, you put out one across the street from me. And, you know, those who know me know I come from a firefighting family. So I've seen firsthand the physical and mental toll that firefighting takes on a person. And when you're constantly working overtime shifts, even me in my role with the state, when I'm working a lot of overtime shifts, it takes a toll on you. So, yeah, I'm glad to see we're finally getting our firefighters some help, some backup.
Last one for me is on the, has there been any progress on programs to rebuild the call company?
Yes, very much so. So we re-advertised for that. We have some exceptional candidates. I think in theory it's going to be a little different. We may capture a few that will be in the old model of the call company, which would be someone in a call status who'd be able to respond to calls on an episodic basis. I think a really good vision we have, and so far shaping up that way, is to sort of use our call company as a training and vetting ground for potential full-time employment. There is a dramatic dearth of available suitable employees for full-time fire positions, which actually makes it even harder on a volunteer basis. It's hard to get volunteers if it's hard to find paid folks, right? Amongst our young applicants, we have some young, well-trained, and looks like exceptionally talented individuals who are missing a few certifications. So if we bring them on board, which we would anyways, we can take advantage of some current grant funding opportunities for medical training, advanced medical training, also firefighter training. So potentially, if his candidates are interviewed and they do well, we could bring them on board. They become city employees, so those startup costs will be absorbed through the call company side of the budget. We could actually take advantage of those grants, pay their salary through the grant, and the city will get a small reimbursement of a couple $1,000s per student, get them to the core certifications. So when we do have a full-time opening, they can transition, if they're suitable, to the full-time company, which giantly shortens that window of, again, filling a full-time position through overtime. So we've thought about that a lot. We looked at the candidate pools, and I think that is going to be a really smart play for us in the future. So we advertised, I think, last Wednesday, and 24-hour period, we had 7 applicants. So we're going to continue to pursue that.
That's great to hear. Awesome. Any public comment? Anybody want to talk? Any other questions? Go ahead.
So if that's the direction you're looking at, then maybe we just adjust the motion to draft a resolution to hire 4 firefighters for the remaining fiscal year, and then either that or you can multiply it out, which I just did. But a portion of it, plus the initial hiring.
I think the question is whether we anticipate needing any funds to do work associated with this before June 30.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm not Yeah, I mean, I'm not prepared to answer that. I would like the flexibility to do it so that I have some room. I mean, the worst thing that happens if we move $41,000, prorate the 492, and we don't use it, it goes back to fund balance. It's, if we're not successful at bringing someone in sooner. So I would be comfortable if we could adjust it to say through the remaining fiscal year.
So at the end, I'll be the one doing the motion. So the one at the end of the after four firefighters, we're adding
For the
verbiage to say.
For the remainder of the fiscal year.
Okay.
And striking the dollar amount.
And let us do a calculation. Does that work?
Yes, ma'am.
Beth, you comfortable with that? Does that work?
I think that we need to figure out what.
We don't know. Yeah.
potential
Right,
calculation.
yeah.
So then, question, so if you do the calculation and you still have to take from fund balance, then you'd have to have a resolution for that.
Right, which this allows me to draft a resolution and come back, but I just need to calculate the number.
So then you'll put that in the resolution,
Yes,
yeah.
correct, yes, yeah.
Just a process question, then would that then have to come
Yes,
back to
yes,
us?
it does.
Would it make sense for us to just put this on more time so that we just have it available?
It does either way.
It has to, the resolution has to be drafted and then go to the council to be referred back to you, so I don't know how to do it any quicker.
Yeah.
Same, okay.
Same. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Move to recommend that the city manager be directed to draft a resolution to allow the hiring of four firefighters for the remainder of the fiscal year. Is that what we're looking for?
I think that works.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further questions? All right. With that, all those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you for your time and support very much.
Of course. Last one, our city engineer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Don Lucier, City Engineer, back again. This is a resolution related to some unanticipated revenue we received from the state. You may recall a few weeks ago, we were talking about some unanticipated revenue specifically for bridge work. This is the other half of that same SB 401, that state, or I guess it's not an ordinance, it's a state law, statute, included provisions for two different allocations to municipalities. One was for bridges, and there was a formula based on the amount of bridges the municipality is responsible for and their population and whatnot. And the other one was for highways. So like the bridge money that we talked about a couple weeks ago, this is restricted for use strictly on highway work. It is also, the language in the bill specifies that it has to be used to supplement, not supplant, local funding for highway purposes. So it has to be used on something that otherwise isn't already funded. And that's the reason why the resolution is recommending that we accept this money and then appropriate it for the Thompson Road reconstruction project. I do want to be clear that this is partial funding for the Thompson Road project. It is not the full cost of the project. In the 2024 CIP updates that you're going to be reviewing here in a few weeks, there is additional funding that's requested to sort of make that project whole. But it does put a nice little dent in it in the tune of $414,000 and change of funds that we received and weren't expecting.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Is there a similar fun fact? Like I know we had the second most bridges behind DOT, where we stacked on roads.
No, there isn't, but here's a fun fact. The Thompson Road is the steepest public road in the city.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's a little worse for wear.
Any questions from the committee? Questions from anybody in the audience? All right. With that, I guess we're ready for a motion.
Move to recommend the adoption of Resolution R 2023-10.
And I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, with that, all those in favor? That's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's the last thing we have. Thank you. We're adjourned.